Sleep without your clothes. The sentence did not sound loud, but it cut through the barracks like cold air slipping under a door. Louisiana, summer of 1945. The night pressed heavy against the wooden walls, thick with heat and the distant hum of insects. Inside, 30 German women stood still, their gray uniforms clinging to their skin, damp from a day in the fields. No one moved. Not at first. Fabric rustled as hands tightened instinctively, fingers gripping sleeves, collars, anything that felt like a boundary between themselves and whatever this meant. They had been told stories. Not by witnesses, but by voices that sounded certain. Stories about what happened when guards gave orders like this. Stories that always ended the same way. Anna Weiss did not lower her eyes. She stood near the back, her posture straight despite the exhaustion in her bones, watching the men instead of the floor. There were 4 of them. American uniforms, sleeves rolled, faces shadowed under the dim yellow light. No one smiled. No one stepped forward. One of the younger women beside her whispered something in German, too quiet to carry, but the tremor in it spread faster than words. Another woman shook her head, barely breathing, as if movement itself might trigger something worse. Outside, a screen door creaked somewhere in the distance. Inside, time slowed. The order hung in the air, unfinished, waiting to become something else. Anna noticed details others missed. One guard shifted his weight, not impatient, just steady. Another kept his eyes level, not searching, not scanning. There was no hunger in their faces. No anticipation. Only a kind of distance she could not immediately explain. Still, the fear did not leave. It sat in the room like heat, invisible but everywhere. A woman near the front took half a step back. The wooden floor gave a soft creak under her heel. It was the only sound for several seconds. Then the door opened. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just a quiet movement of hinges. Captain Robert Hayes stepped inside, his boots stopping just past the threshold. He did not raise his voice. He did not repeat the order. He looked across the room once, not at their bodies, but at their faces, as if counting something that had nothing to do with numbers. The air shifted, just slightly. Not safer. Not yet. But different. Anna felt it. Before she understood it. And for the first time since the words had been spoken, she realized the silence in the room was no longer just fear. It was waiting. Captain Robert Hayes did not speak right away. He let the silence stay where it was, heavy and unresolved, as if it had a purpose. The women stood in place, shoulders tense, eyes fixed in different directions but all aware of him now. A ceiling fan turned slowly above, its blades cutting the thick air into uneven pieces that did nothing to cool the room. Hayes took one step forward, then another, stopping beside the first row of bunks. He did not look at the women. He looked down at the mattresses. His hand reached out and pressed lightly against the fabric, then lifted, as if testing something unseen. Anna followed the movement. She noticed the way his fingers brushed against the edge of the blanket, not with hesitation, but with precision. He turned slightly and spoke, his voice even, measured, each word placed carefully into the room. He spoke about infestation. About insects that lived in seams and folds. About how they spread in heat like this, moving from one body to another without permission. He spoke about fever, about infection, about nights that became worse if nothing was done. The translator repeated his words in German, slower, softer, but no less clear. A ripple moved through the group, not panic, but confusion. This was not the explanation they had prepared themselves for. Hayes gestured toward the bunks again, then toward a stack of folded items near the wall. Clean sheets. Fresh fabric. He explained the procedure. Clothing would be collected. Washed at high temperature. Dried until nothing living remained. The barracks would be treated the same way. It was not punishment. It was prevention. Anna watched the guards. They had not moved closer. One of them stepped back slightly, giving more space instead of taking it. Another turned his head toward the open doorway, as if checking something outside rather than watching inside. Small movements. Easy to miss. Impossible to ignore once seen. A woman near the front lowered her hands slowly from her collar. Not fully relaxed, but no longer gripping. Another looked at the sheets, then at the floor, her breathing still uneven but changing. Hayes gave one final instruction. The doors would be closed. No. Guards would remain inside. They would have privacy. The word settled differently than the others. Privacy. It did not belong to the stories they had been told. He stepped back toward the entrance. Before leaving, he paused, just long enough to turn his body away from them completely, his back facing the room. Not symbolic. Not dramatic. Just practical. The door closed behind him with a soft click. The guards followed, their boots fading into the night. The sound of the insects outside returned, steady and indifferent. Inside, no one moved for a few seconds longer. Then Anna exhaled. It was the first full breath she had taken since the order was given. She looked at the others, at their faces, at the way the fear had shifted into something uncertain, something searching. Not trust. Not yet. But no longer the same fear. She reached for the edge of her sleeve, her fingers loosening their grip without urgency, without pressure. Around her, the room began to move again, slowly, carefully, as if relearning how. The room did not change all at once. It shifted in pieces. A sleeve lowered. A breath released. The faint sound of fabric moving replaced the silence that had held them frozen only moments before. Anna stood where she was, her hand resting lightly against her arm, not gripping anymore, just touching. Around her, the others moved carefully, each motion measured, as if testing whether the space itself had become safe. No one spoke loudly. A few whispered in German, words short and uncertain, not questions, not answers, just attempts to understand what had just happened. One woman stepped toward the stack of clean sheets, her fingers hovering above the folded fabric before finally lifting one. She held it close, pressing it briefly against her face as if confirming it was real. Another sat down slowly on the edge of a bunk, her shoulders lowering for the first time that night. The air still felt heavy, but something inside it had loosened. Anna walked toward the nearest bed. The mattress was thin, the wood frame simple, but now she saw what she had not noticed before. The seams. The edges. The places where something unseen could live. She thought about the words the captain had used. Not threats. Not warnings. Just facts. He had not raised his voice. He had not rushed them. He had explained. That was the part that did not fit with anything she had expected. A woman across from her spoke quietly, her voice steadier now. She said that in another camp, no one explained anything. Orders came, and you followed them or you paid for it. Anna listened but did not respond. She was watching the door. It remained closed. No shadows moved beneath it. No footsteps returned. Time passed, though it was hard to measure how long. The ceiling fan continued its slow rotation, pushing warm air in circles that no longer felt suffocating, just present. One by one, the women began to prepare for the night, not with urgency, not with fear, but with a kind of quiet acceptance that surprised even them. There was still hesitation in every movement, but it was no longer driven by panic. It was caution learning something new. Anna sat down on the bunk and placed her uniform neatly beside her, smoothing the fabric with her hand as if it still mattered how it looked. She paused, then glanced once more toward the door. Still nothing. She leaned back slowly, her body adjusting to the unfamiliar feeling of the clean sheet beneath her. It was cooler than she expected. Simpler. Different. Across the room, someone let out a long breath, almost like a sigh of relief, though no one would have called it that out loud. The fear had not disappeared. It had changed shape. It no longer pressed down from above. It sat somewhere lower now, quieter, less certain of itself. Anna closed her eyes for a moment, not to sleep, but to listen. No raised voices. No sudden movement. Only the steady rhythm of breathing filling the room. And in that rhythm, something else began to take form. Not trust. Not yet. But the beginning of something that felt like it could become it. The night did not rush forward. It settled. The barracks held a quiet that felt different from before, not empty, but steady, like something had been decided without anyone saying it out loud. Anna lay on her back, eyes open, watching the slow turn of the ceiling fan above her. Each rotation marked time in a way the clock outside could not. The heat had not left, but it no longer pressed against her skin with the same weight. It simply existed, like the distant hum of insects beyond the walls. Around her, breathing had found a rhythm. Not synchronized, but close enough to feel shared. A woman on the far side shifted in her bunk, the wood giving a soft creak, then stillness again. No one spoke. There was nothing left to question in this moment. Anna turned her head slightly toward the door. It remained closed, unchanged, a simple barrier that had not been crossed since it shut. She thought about that. Not the order. Not the confusion. The choice. The way the captain had stepped back. The way the guards had left without hesitation. It had not felt like control. It had felt like restraint. That word did not come easily to her. It was not something she had associated with uniforms or authority. Yet it stayed in her mind, repeating quietly. Across the room, one of the older women whispered a few words, soft enough to disappear before reaching anyone else. No answer followed. There did not need to be one. The silence held them together more clearly than conversation could. Anna closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again. Sleep did not come immediately. Her thoughts moved through fragments of memory, places that no longer existed the way they once had, voices that had spoken with certainty about what the enemy would do, how they would act, what they would take. Those voices had been loud. Confident. Absolute. But they had not described this. They had not prepared her for a moment where nothing was taken, where no one crossed a line that could have been crossed easily. She shifted slightly on the mattress, the clean sheet cool beneath her, a detail so small it almost felt unimportant, yet it stayed with her. Clean. Intentional. Prepared before they arrived. Not improvised. Not accidental. It suggested something else entirely. Planning. Consideration. The idea unsettled her more than fear had. Because it required a different kind of understanding. Time passed. Minutes, maybe longer. The fan continued its slow rotation. The night outside remained unchanged. Inside, the room had become something quieter than safety, something that did not demand trust but allowed it to begin if it chose to. Anna let her eyes close again, this time not forcing them open. Her breathing matched the rhythm around her, steady, even. And just before sleep finally reached her, one thought settled clearly, without resistance. Not every command was meant to break something. Some were meant to keep something from being broken at all. Morning arrived without announcement. No whistle. No shouted command. Just light, thin and pale, slipping through the wooden slats and stretching across the floor in quiet lines. Anna opened her eyes before anyone else moved. For a moment, she did not remember where she was. Then the ceiling came into focus. The slow fan. The shape of the barracks. The memory returned, not as fear, but as something unresolved. She sat up slowly, the sheet falling back with a soft sound. Around her, the others were beginning to stir, movement small and cautious, as if testing whether the night had truly passed without consequence. No one rushed. No one panicked. That alone felt unfamiliar. A woman near the window stood first, reaching for the neatly folded clothing placed at the foot of her bunk. Clean. Pressed. Not the same fabric they had worn the day before. Another woman noticed it too, her fingers hesitating just above the material before lifting it carefully, as if it might disappear if handled too quickly. Anna looked down at her own bunk. The same stack waited for her. She reached out and touched the fabric. It was warm, not from heat, but from having been prepared, handled, returned. She turned the sleeve slightly, inspecting the stitching, the seams where something invisible had once hidden. Now, nothing remained. The room filled slowly with the sound of fabric being unfolded, of quiet breaths, of movement that no longer carried the sharp edge of fear. No one spoke about the night. Not directly. But it was there, in the way they moved, in the way their shoulders no longer stayed raised, in the way their eyes met briefly without looking away. Anna stood and dressed, each motion steady, deliberate. When she finished, she glanced once more at the door. It opened a few seconds later, not abruptly, just enough to let the morning in. One of the guards stood outside, not entering, simply waiting. He nodded once, a small gesture, then stepped back to give space. No urgency. No pressure. The women began to file out, one by one, their steps measured but no longer hesitant. Outside, the air felt different. Still warm, still heavy, but open. The sky stretched wide above the camp, pale blue with the first hints of heat already rising from the ground. Anna stepped onto the dirt path and paused for a fraction of a second. She expected to feel watched. Judged. Measured. Instead, the guards stood at a distance, speaking quietly among themselves, not looking toward the barracks at all. It was a detail so simple it almost went unnoticed. Almost. The line of women moved forward toward the mess hall, their shadows long in the early light. Somewhere in the distance, a metal pot clanged softly, followed by the faint smell of coffee carried on the air. Normal sounds. Ordinary. Anna walked with the others, her pace matching theirs, but her attention moved elsewhere. She was watching the space between people. The distance that had been kept. The distance that had not been crossed. It stayed with her more than anything else. Not what had been ordered. Not what had been done. But what had not been done when it could have been. As they reached the mess hall steps, she paused again, just briefly, her hand brushing against the fabric at her sleeve. Clean. Intact. Unchanged. And for the first time since arriving, the word that formed in her mind was not survival. It was something quieter. Something harder to accept. Respect. The mess hall doors stood open, letting in the full weight of the morning. Heat gathered early in Louisiana, rising from the ground in slow waves that blurred the edges of everything beyond a few hundred feet. Inside, long wooden tables stretched in straight lines, their surfaces worn smooth by years of use. The women entered quietly, their steps measured, their eyes moving without turning their heads. Anna walked near the center of the group, aware of the space around her, aware of how it felt different now. Not safe. Not yet. But no longer sharp with tension. Metal trays waited at the front. Food was already set. Eggs, bread, coffee. Simple. Enough. The smell reached them before they reached the tables, warm and steady, something that belonged to a different life. One of the guards stood near the serving line. He did not speak. He only gestured once, a small movement of his hand indicating where to go. No orders. No raised voice. Just direction. The women followed, one by one, taking trays, moving along the line. Anna watched closely. The guard did not look at them the way she expected. His eyes moved past faces, past shoulders, as if he were counting something invisible, something procedural. Not curiosity. Not judgment. Just duty, carried out without weight. She took her tray when it was her turn, the metal cool against her hands, and stepped aside. A seat opened near the middle of the table. She sat. Across from her, a woman she recognized from the barracks lowered herself slowly, her movements still careful, but no longer hesitant. Around them, the room filled with quiet sounds. Forks against trays. Chairs shifting against wood. Coffee being poured into metal cups. No one rushed. No one hovered. The guards remained near the edges of the room, speaking among themselves in low voices that did not carry. One of them laughed briefly at something, then stopped, as if remembering where he was, though the sound had not disturbed anyone. Anna lifted her cup. The coffee was hot. Strong. She held it for a moment before drinking, letting the heat settle into her hands. Across the table, the woman looked at her, just for a second, then gave the smallest nod. Not a greeting. Not a smile. Something quieter. Recognition. Anna returned it without thinking. It was the first exchange of its kind since arriving. No fear in it. No warning. Just acknowledgement. She ate slowly, paying attention to the room as much as the food. The guards did not move closer. They did not interrupt. They did not watch in the way she had expected. They allowed the space to exist without stepping into it. That detail stayed with her. It connected to the night before in a way she could not ignore. The distance was not accidental. It was maintained. Deliberate. Outside, the light grew stronger, pushing through the open doorway, stretching shadows across the floor that shifted as time moved forward. Anna finished her meal and set the tray down with a soft sound. Around her, others did the same. No one lingered. No one was rushed out. They stood, one by one, and moved toward the exit, the line forming naturally without instruction. As Anna stepped outside again, the heat met her fully, wrapping around her like something familiar. She paused for a brief second at the threshold, her eyes adjusting to the brightness. Then she noticed it. Captain Robert Hayes stood at a distance near the edge of the yard, speaking with another officer. He did not look toward the mess hall. He did not look toward them at all. He simply stood there, part of the space, not imposing on it. Anna watched him for a moment longer than necessary. Then she looked away and continued walking, her step steady, her mind holding on to a single thought that refused to leave. Whatever had happened the night before had not been an exception. It had been a standard. The work assignments came without ceremony. A clipboard. A list of names. A guard reading them out in a voice that carried just enough to be heard but not enough to command. Anna stood in line with the others, the sun already climbing higher, pressing heat down onto the packed dirt yard. When her name was called, she stepped forward, not quickly, not slowly, just at the same pace she had chosen since that morning began. A group of 6 was directed toward the far end of the compound where a narrow gate opened to the fields beyond. The guard at the gate unlocked it without looking at them directly, stepping aside to let them pass first. Another small detail. Another space given instead of taken. Outside the fence, the land stretched wide and flat, rows of crops running in straight lines toward a horizon that shimmered in the growing heat. The air smelled different here. Soil. Grass. Something alive. Anna adjusted her grip on the canvas sack handed to her, the rough fabric brushing against her palm. No one explained the work in detail. They did not need to. The rows spoke for themselves. Bend. Pick. Move forward. Repeat. The rhythm formed quickly, not from instruction, but from observation. The women spread out along the line, each taking a section, each falling into motion with a quiet efficiency shaped by necessity rather than habit. Anna moved steadily, her hands working without hesitation, her attention divided between the task and the space around her. A guard stood at the edge of the field, not close, not distant, just present. He leaned against a wooden post, his hat pulled low, watching the horizon more than the workers. At one point, he walked down the line, stopping near a woman whose pace had slowed. He did not raise his voice. He pointed to the water container set in the shade of a tree. And waited until she nodded before moving on. No correction. No pressure. Just direction. The sun climbed higher. Heat settled deeper. Sweat gathered at the back of Anna's neck, tracing a line down her spine. She wiped it away with the back of her hand and kept moving. The work was not easy, but it was not unfamiliar either. What remained unfamiliar was the absence of urgency. No one shouted to move faster. No one measured their output with visible judgment. Time passed in a steady flow marked only by the position of the sun and the gradual filling of the sacks. At midday, the guard signaled a break with a simple lift of his hand. The women stepped back from the rows, gathering near the tree where shade offered a narrow escape from the heat. Water was passed around in metal cups. Anna drank slowly, the warmth of it still welcome, still enough. She sat on the ground, her back against the rough bark, and looked out across the field. The horizon blurred in the distance, the air shimmering in waves that made everything seem slightly unreal. Across from her, one of the women spoke quietly, not about the work, not about the camp, but about something small. The way the soil here was softer than in Germany. The way the rows were spaced differently. It was a simple observation. It did not carry weight. But it changed the air around them. Anna listened, then added one detail of her own. The way the wind moved differently here. Lighter. Less sharp. The conversation did not grow. It did not need to. It existed for a moment, then faded, leaving behind something that had not been there before. Normalcy. A word that felt almost out of place. When the break ended, the guard lifted his hand again. No whistle. No command. Just a signal. The women returned to the rows, resuming the rhythm without resistance. Anna bent forward, her hands moving through the plants, her mind steady. The pattern of the day was becoming clear. Not just the work. Not just the routine. But the structure beneath it. A structure that did not rely on force to hold it in place. A structure that expected something instead of demanding it. And as she moved down the row, one step at a time, Anna realized that understanding this structure might be more difficult than anything else she had faced so far. The afternoon stretched longer than it should have. Heat settled into everything, slowing movement, softening edges, turning each step into something deliberate. Anna moved down the row with the same steady rhythm, her hands working without pause, her thoughts quieter now, less crowded than before. The field seemed endless under the pale sky, each line of crops repeating the one before it, a pattern that asked for patience more than strength. Sweat gathered along her forehead and slipped down, but she did not stop. No one did. Not because they were forced to continue, but because stopping felt unnecessary. That was the difference she could not ignore. The guard at the edge of the field shifted his position as the sun moved, stepping into the shade when it shortened, stepping out again when it disappeared. He did not call out. He did not correct. At one point, he walked toward a section where the rows had grown uneven, bent slightly, and straightened a fallen plant with careful hands before moving on. No announcement. No instruction. Just a quiet correction that left no trace behind. Anna noticed. She noticed everything now. The way distance was maintained. The way space was respected. The way nothing unnecessary was added to the moment. It created a kind of silence that was not empty, but structured. Late in the afternoon, a cloud moved across the sun, thin and temporary, but enough to shift the light. The field changed color for a few minutes, the green deepening, the shadows softening. Anna straightened her back for the first time in a while, feeling the pull of muscles that had worked without complaint. She looked up. The horizon was still there, still distant, still unreachable. But it no longer felt like something that needed to be reached. It simply existed. A boundary that did not press inward. A voice called out her name, not sharply, not loudly, just enough to reach her. She turned. One of the women stood a few rows away, holding up a nearly full sack, her expression uncertain. Anna stepped over, took hold of the weight, and helped guide it toward the collection point near the tree. The guard was already there, adjusting the stack of filled sacks, making space without comment. He nodded once as they approached, not at them, but at the work itself, as if acknowledging completion rather than effort. The gesture was small. It stayed with her. As the sun began to lower, the signal to stop came the same way it had before. A raised hand. Nothing more. The women stepped back from the rows, their movements slower now, not from fear, but from fatigue that had settled honestly into their bodies. Anna wiped her hands against the fabric of her pants, then looked out across the field one more time. The day had passed without incident. No sudden changes. No hidden consequences. Just work. Just structure. Just space that had been held, not taken. As they walked back toward the gate, the light softened, stretching long shadows across the ground. The guard opened the gate again, stepping aside, allowing them to enter first. The same motion as before. The same absence of pressure. Anna crossed the threshold and paused for half a second, her eyes moving across the camp, taking in the barracks, the paths, the distance between each building. Everything remained as it had been that morning. But she was not the same person who had stepped out. She carried something now. Not trust. Not belief. Something quieter. Something that did not need to be named yet. As she continued walking, the thought returned, clearer this time, without resistance. Whatever this place was, it was not built on fear alone. The return to the barracks carried a different weight than the night before. The same wooden walls. The same narrow path. The same door that opened with a soft push and revealed the rows of bunks inside. But the air did not tighten when they stepped in. It settled around them, familiar now, like something that had already been tested and had not failed. Anna entered with the others, her step steady, her eyes moving across the room without urgency. The beds were as they had been left. The folded blankets. The clean lines. No disturbance. No sign that anyone had crossed into the space while they were gone. That detail mattered more than she expected. Around her, the women began to move into their routines, quiet and unspoken. Some sat on their bunks, removing dust from their shoes with careful hands. Others reached for water, splashing their faces, letting the day wash away in small, controlled motions. No one rushed. No one hesitated. The rhythm had already begun to form. Anna moved to her bunk and sat down, resting her hands on her knees for a moment before leaning forward, her elbows pressing lightly into the fabric. The exhaustion was there now, fully present, not masked by tension or anticipation. It felt honest. Across from her, the same woman from the morning adjusted her sleeve, smoothing the fabric the same way Anna had done earlier. Their eyes met briefly again. This time, the nod came without hesitation. Not agreement. Not friendship. Something simpler. Recognition that the day had passed without breaking anything. A small shift. Easy to miss. Important once seen. Outside, the sound of footsteps moved along the path, then faded. A door opened somewhere else in the compound, then closed. Normal sounds. Repeated. Predictable. Anna leaned back slowly against the wall behind her bunk, letting her head rest for a moment. The wood was warm from the day's heat. She closed her eyes, not fully, just enough to soften the light filtering through the slats. Her thoughts did not rush in the way they had the night before. They moved slower now, more deliberate, as if they no longer needed to prepare for something unknown. One of the women stood near the center of the room and spoke quietly, her voice steady, not trembling. She mentioned the guard in the field. The way he had stepped back. The way he had waited instead of directing. No one responded immediately. Then another voice added a detail. The door the night before. Closed. No one inside. The words were simple. They did not build into anything larger. But they remained in the air, connecting pieces that had not been spoken out loud until now. Anna listened without turning her head. The pattern was becoming visible. Not in a single moment. Not in a single action. But across them all. Repeated. Consistent. Intentional. She opened her eyes again and looked toward the door. It stood slightly open now, letting in the fading light of late afternoon. No guard stood there. No shadow blocked the entrance. The space remained theirs. That, more than anything, settled something inside her. Not fully. Not completely. But enough. As evening approached, the room dimmed gradually, the light shifting from gold to something softer, something quieter. The ceiling fan continued its slow rotation, marking time the same way it had the night before. Anna lay back on her bunk, her hands resting at her sides, her breathing even. She did not brace herself this time. She did not wait for something to happen. She simply existed in the space as it was. And as the first hint of night returned, she realized the question had changed. It was no longer about what they might do. It was about why they had not. Evening returned the same way it had the night before, but it did not feel the same. The light faded slowly through the slats of the barracks, stretching across the floor before disappearing into shadow. The air cooled only slightly, just enough to take the edge off the heat that had settled throughout the day. Anna remained on her bunk, watching the shift happen in real time, the transition from day to night unfolding without interruption. Around her, the others moved with a quiet familiarity that had not existed before. Small routines formed without instruction. Shoes placed beneath beds. Sleeves folded neatly. Water shared without words. The room no longer held the same tight silence. It held something softer, something that allowed movement without hesitation. A woman near the far wall lit a small lamp, its glow steady and contained, casting warm light across a few nearby bunks without reaching the entire room. It was enough. No one asked for more. Anna sat up slowly, her feet touching the floor, the wood still holding the warmth of the day. She glanced toward the door. It remained open for a moment longer than expected, then closed gently from the outside. No announcement. No presence lingering in the frame. Just the quiet confirmation that the space was again theirs. She stood and moved toward the center of the room, not because she needed to, but because she wanted to feel the space differently. From here, she could see all the bunks, all the small movements, all the faces no longer turned away. One of the women spoke again, this time not in a whisper, but still soft enough to keep the room calm. She said that nothing had been taken from them. The words were simple. They settled into the air without resistance. Another woman added that something had been returned instead. No one defined what that was. No one needed to. Anna listened, then turned her attention to the window. Outside, the sky had deepened into a dark blue, the last line of light barely visible along the horizon. Insects moved through the air, their sound steady and constant, a background that had not changed since they arrived. Inside, everything else had. She returned to her bunk and sat down, her hands resting loosely at her sides. The memory of the previous night surfaced again, not as tension, but as clarity. The order. The pause. The explanation. The choice to leave. It aligned now with everything that had followed. Not a single moment. A pattern. She lay back slowly, her head settling against the thin pillow, her eyes tracing the slow rotation of the fan above. Each turn felt measured, deliberate, like everything else in this place. Around her, the others began to settle in the same way, their movements quiet, their breathing evening out. No one braced. No one waited for something to break the calm. Anna closed her eyes, then opened them again, just for a moment, her gaze returning once more to the door. Still closed. Still untouched. She understood it differently now. Not as a barrier. As a boundary that had been respected. That distinction stayed with her. As the room grew quieter, as the night settled fully into place, she let her eyes close again, her body no longer holding tension it had carried for too long. And in that stillness, one thought remained, clear and steady. This was not kindness by accident. It was something chosen, again and again, even when it did not have to be. The night deepened without interruption. The barrack settled into a steady rhythm, the sound of breathing rising and falling in quiet waves that filled the space more completely than silence ever had. Anna did not fall asleep immediately. She lay still, her eyes half closed, listening. Not for danger. Not for footsteps. Just listening. The difference was small. It changed everything. A faint breeze moved through the gaps in the wooden walls, carrying the distant scent of earth and something sweet she could not name. The fan above continued its slow rotation, each turn marking time in a way that felt almost deliberate. Across the room, someone shifted, then stilled again. No sharp movements. No sudden tension. Just the natural adjustments of people no longer bracing for impact. Anna turned her head slightly toward the window. The sky outside was darker now, the last traces of light gone, replaced by a depth that stretched farther than she could measure. It reminded her of something she had not allowed herself to think about since before the war. Open space without threat. The idea felt unfamiliar. She let her gaze linger there for a moment, then closed her eyes fully. Sleep came slowly, but it came without resistance. Not pulled down by exhaustion. Not forced. It arrived the way the evening had, gradually, without announcement. At some point in the night, she woke. Not suddenly. Not with alarm. Just awareness returning. The room remained unchanged. The same quiet. The same steady rhythm. No voices. No movement beyond what was expected. She did not sit up. She did not reach for anything. She simply listened again. The absence of interruption confirmed something she had not fully accepted until now. Nothing was coming. No second order. No reversal. No hidden consequence waiting to reveal itself in the dark. The night was allowed to remain what it was. She let that realization settle without questioning it. Across from her, the outline of another woman was visible in the dim light, her breathing even, her posture relaxed in a way that had not existed before. It was not trust. It was the beginning of it. Anna closed her eyes again, and this time, sleep took her more easily. When morning came, it did not feel like a release. It felt like a continuation. Light entered the room the same way as before, quiet, unannounced, stretching across the floor in narrow lines. Anna opened her eyes and remained still for a moment, not needing to orient herself. She already knew where she was. She already knew what to expect. Around her, the others began to wake, their movements unhurried, their expressions no longer guarded by default. One woman sat up and looked around the room, not searching, just observing. Another reached for her clothing, the motion smooth, practiced, unafraid. Anna sat up slowly, her hands resting briefly on the edge of the bunk. The wood felt the same. The air felt the same. But the space between those things had changed. She stood and moved toward the center of the room again, her eyes passing over each detail without stopping. Everything remained intact. Nothing had been disturbed. The pattern held. She understood now that this was not something that would reveal itself in a single moment. It would continue. Repeated. Reinforced. Not by words. By actions that did not draw attention to themselves. As the door opened and the morning expanded into the room, Anna did not brace herself. She did not prepare for contradiction. She stepped forward with the others, her movement steady, her mind clear in a way it had not been since before she arrived. And as she crossed the threshold into the light, one thought remained, not as a question, but as something closer to an answer. Some structures are not built to control people. Some are built to prove that control is not necessary at all. The second day did not announce itself as different, but it revealed itself in small, precise ways that could not be ignored once seen. The line formed outside the barracks without instruction, each woman stepping into place with a quiet understanding that had not existed before. Anna stood among them, her posture relaxed but not careless, her eyes moving across the yard with a clarity that felt new. The guards were already present, positioned at the same distance as the day before, not closer, not farther. Consistent. That was the word that began to take shape in her mind. Not kind. Not lenient. Consistent. The roll call was read in the same measured tone, names spoken clearly, without urgency, without pressure. When Anna's name came, she responded in the same steady voice she had used the day before, but this time it did not carry the same tension beneath it. It was simply her voice. The gate opened again, the same motion, the same pause to allow them through first. No change. That absence of change began to feel like something solid, something that could be relied upon without being promised. In the field, the rows waited as they had before, untouched by anything except time and light. The work resumed with the same rhythm, hands moving, steps measured, breath steady. But something subtle had shifted beneath it. The silence was no longer defensive. It was functional. It allowed focus. It allowed thought. Anna worked with the same precision, her attention divided between the task and the structure around it. A woman further down the row dropped her sack, the weight pulling it to the ground with a dull thud. She paused, her hands hovering above it for a second longer than necessary. Before she could bend, the guard nearest to her stepped forward, not quickly, not dramatically, just enough to close the distance. He lifted the sack with one hand, steadying it, then set it upright again without a word. He did not look at her face. He did not wait for acknowledgement. He stepped back to his position and resumed watching the field. The moment lasted only a few seconds. It stayed longer. Anna saw it. So did others. No one spoke about it. They did not need to. The pattern extended. Midday came. The break was signaled the same way. Water passed from hand to hand. The shade held them briefly, then released them back to the rows. Nothing unexpected happened. Nothing needed to. That was the point. As the afternoon moved forward, the structure held without strain. No correction became punishment. No silence became threat. Everything remained within the same boundaries that had been established the night before. Anna straightened her back again, looking out across the field. The horizon remained unchanged, but her understanding of it had shifted. It was no longer something distant and unreachable. It was simply part of the space, existing without pressure, without demand. When the signal came to end the work, the women stepped back in unison, their movements slower from fatigue, but not from hesitation. The gate opened again. The same gesture. The same distance maintained. As Anna walked back toward the barracks, she felt the weight of the day settle into her body, but not into her thoughts. Those had become lighter. Not empty. Clear. The structure had not broken. It had repeated. That repetition mattered more than any explanation could. As she reached the door and stepped inside, she realized something with a quiet certainty that did not require confirmation. This place was not asking them to trust. It was showing them what trust looked like, one action at a time. The pattern did not break on the third evening. It deepened. The barracks received them the same way it had before, unchanged, steady, holding its shape without resistance. Anna stepped inside with the others, her movements neither cautious nor careless, simply aligned with what had already been learned. The door remained open for a moment, then closed with the same quiet certainty as the nights before. No announcement. No presence left behind. The space belonged to them again. Around her, the women moved through the room with a familiarity that no longer needed to be built. It existed. Shoes placed in the same position. Sleeves folded the same way. Water shared without request. The repetition did not feel mechanical. It felt intentional. Anna paused at the center of the room, just for a second, her eyes moving across the details that had once felt foreign. Now they felt defined. The distance between bunks. The absence of intrusion. The way nothing had been disturbed during their absence. It was not a temporary condition. It was a maintained one. She moved to her bunk and sat down, her hands resting lightly against the fabric beside her. Across from her, the same woman met her eyes again, this time not with uncertainty, but with something steadier. No nod was needed. The acknowledgement had already been established. Outside, the light faded once more, slower now, stretching the day into evening with a quiet consistency that matched everything else. Anna leaned back, her gaze lifting toward the ceiling fan as it turned, unchanged, marking time without urgency. The memory of the first night returned, but it no longer held the same weight. It had been the beginning of something, not the test of it. The test had been everything that followed. The repetition. The consistency. The absence of contradiction. That was what held meaning now. A woman near the window spoke softly, not questioning, not analyzing, just stating something simple. That nothing had been taken. The words remained in the air for a moment, then settled. Anna added nothing. She did not need to. She understood what had not been said. That something had been preserved. Something that had not required defense because it had not been threatened. She lay back slowly, her body aligning with the thin mattress, her breathing steady, her mind clear. There was no anticipation left in the room. No waiting for a shift that might undo what had been built. The pattern had held too long for that. It had proven itself without declaration. Anna closed her eyes, then opened them once more, her gaze moving briefly toward the door. Still closed. Still undisturbed. She understood it now in a way she could not have on the first night. It was not control that defined this place. It was restraint. Chosen. Repeated. Maintained. And in that restraint, something else had taken shape. Not fear. Not obedience. Something quieter. Something that did not need to be enforced to exist. Anna let her eyes close again, her body settling into the rhythm that had become familiar. The room breathed around her, steady and unbroken. And in that stillness, the final understanding arrived without resistance, without doubt. She had not raised her voice. She had not resisted. She had not needed to. Because what she had protected had never been taken in the first place.